Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to Cognigy.AI Tech Update, our second edition for 2023. I'm new product marketing manager at Cognigy, and I'm very excited to open today's webinar and welcome you all and introduce you to our speakers and the exciting agenda that we have in store. But before we dive right in, let's quickly go over a few housekeeping items. During the webinar, all participants will be in listen-only mode, but we encourage you to use the Q&A function at any time to share your thoughts, comments, and questions, and we will make sure to address them accordingly. The webinar recording will be shared with you all via email within the next 24 hours, and it will also be available in our product blog and help center, so you can revisit the content later on whenever you need it. With that said, let's kick off today's tech update with a quick recap on the product releases that have taken place in the past 3 months. Our R&D team has been hard at work to bring you the latest and greatest AI capabilities, and within the last 7 releases, we have introduced a total of 93 product updates, including 36 new features and 57 other large and small improvements. As you can see, the majority of product updates were made in Cognigy Virtual Agents, which is our low-code CI flow builder. But we have also made a lot of other product updates across Voice Gateway, Insights, and Live Agent. In today's webinar, we won't be able to cover every single improvement, but don't worry because our team of product experts have prepared a very insightful agenda focusing on our top 3 product topics in the past months. First up is Generative AI, which obviously has been the talk of the town. And for that, Sebastian, our senior technology evangelist, will take you on a hands-on journey showcasing how you can leverage our LM features to supercharge your conversation design and bot building processes. Following that, Derek, VP of Technology, and Dilek, our product manager of voice, will guide you through the latest voice native features and how you can implement them for your contact center automation. And last but not least, Benjamin, our tech, will take the stage alongside with Derek to unveil an exclusive sneak peek into our brand new feature, Cognigy xApps, and how you can leverage this tool to build amazing multimodal conversational experiences. Now, without further ado, I have the pleasure of handing over to Sebastian, who will give us a deep dive into the ever-evolving world of generative AI. Sebastian, take it away.
Thank you, New, and welcome everybody to our tech update about generative AI and Cognigy.AI. I want to dive in with a high-level view of the architecture and where generative AI sits in Cognigy.AI. I think most of you have seen this version or another version of this kind of architecture diagram. Left-hand side, that's the channels, that's where our end customers text or call, and the right-hand side, that's the business systems. Is where they get stuff done. And Cognigy.AI, the big blue box, sits in the middle, kind of connects end users on their channels of choice to the backend systems so they can achieve their goals. What is now new, and we were the first enterprise conversational AI vendor to roll that out already in January, is the native integration with LLM services. All the examples that you'll see in today's video are powered by Azure OpenAI, but in general, we take an agnostic approach towards LLMs. And we already support integrations with Aleph Alpha and Anthropic via Cognigy extensions, but we're going to roll out more features in the direction of LLM orchestration, and I'm going to mention some of that by the end of this presentation. When we look at LLMs in the context of Cognigy.AI, that is not a one-trick pony for us. We see applications of LLM technology across the entire chain, from bot building to bot production. Of course, there's faster and more efficient bot building, and you will see some examples on the next slides. But then there's the big topic of better voice and chat experiences. LLMs can really be used to lift human-machine interactions to a whole new level, and I'm also going to provide you some examples in that direction. Finally, there is a next generation of agent assist. I won't zoom in too much in today's webinar. Just keep in mind that there are things like contextualized replies, so the perfect suggested reply for a human agent that can be generated by LLMs. There's also features like auto-summarization or a new way of tracking, for example, customer sentiment via LLMs that you will hear about in the next weeks and months to come. Let's start with faster and more efficient bot building, and I want to kick it off with my favorite example, which is AI-powered flow generation. So everybody in this call has probably seen or used the Cognigy.AI low-code editor to build processes and model flows. And now we have enhanced it with a new way of creating those flows, which is by giving it a verbal description. So here, I'm asking it to create a flow that asks the customer for a follow-up via email or phone, and then kind of retrieve the email address or phone number. And with one click, I get a fully pre-generated Cognigy.AI flow with native flow nodes, and all of these are pre-populated with the right content, and it's already fully functional. You can test it out in the interaction panel. You could also call it and kind of tweak and optimize the experiences from here. Of course, this is not yet connected to any backend systems, so we haven't entered any API keys or something. That would be a next step, but this is already a great time saver. And the same is true for AI-powered lexicon generations. Lexicons, as you know, are entity collections ranging from pizza toppings to, let's say, products in your shop. And here in this example, I am using it to create airport codes. So the LLM will now create a lexicon with US airport codes, their names and their kind of abbreviation. And just like with the flow, with one click on create, I'm getting a new lexicon pre-populated with key phrases, slots, and synonyms. And this is already ready to go live. You can, of course, fine-tune it. You can add more airports or remove some of them if they are not on your flight plan. But I think it's obvious that this can be a great time saver. The same is true for AI-powered training data. Training the NLU is a big part of every Cognigy project. And creating those example sentences is now easier than ever, also with LLM support. So here in this example, I'm creating a lost luggage intent with a collection of customer utterances, lost or cannot find their luggage. I'm asking it for, well, give me 15 sentences, and here is my brand new intent. 15 sentences already in them. As always, you can fine-tune it, you can remove or add. You can also enrich it with production data by using the intent trainer. And I guess this is kind of obvious how much time this can save and how much this can also speed up your prototyping. Moving on from faster and more efficient bot building to better voice and chat experiences. When we launched our LLM features in January, we had a really nice part of the webinar where we showed kind of the future of human-machine communication with an entirely LLM-powered bot. So if you watch that video that is linked here on the right-hand side, you can witness how a bot is capable of some sort of small talk, of general question answering, but it at the same time stays on task and fulfills a mission which is transactional. In that case, that was scheduling an appointment. Not everybody in the webinar was totally convinced that this isn't scripted, right? Some people thought, well, it can't be that LLMs are that good, but turns out they are. And which is why we released the GPT conversation node shortly after. And this is a way for you to explore the technology in action and build your first bots with the same approach. Please note that this is in research preview, so we don't recommend using that approach already in production today. But like I said, still try it out, gain experience with that, and get a glimpse at kind of a potential future of conversational AI. How it works behind the scenes is that it's a new node available on trial and app. And if you open that, there is quite a big form with a lot of configurations. So it starts, for example, with the question, do you want a transactional bot or do you want a Q&A bot? And from here, there is all sorts of tuning that can be done. But all of this is kind of verbally. It's all in written language. You don't need to code to build the bot. So for example, the persona here is just the written description. And the same is true, for example, for the task that it's fulfilling, it's grounding knowledge and so on. So very easy to do, very easy to understand. And yeah, feel free to use it and gain own experiences. If you don't want to build your own bot, but you still want to find out what it's like to talk to an LLM-powered bot, you can go to Cognigy.com and then the voice gateway page. and there you'll find these 4 phone numbers. They are connected to that doctor's appointment scheduling bot that you've seen earlier. And you can just call it, talk to it, try to throw it a bit of track, and well, play around with it. So have fun if you want to do that. With every generative AI application in customer-facing bots, what you absolutely need to do is do sort of a value and risk assessment to understand what you want to do and what the best approach is. The examples that I've shown in the beginning of this webinar, for example, example sentences, flow generation, and so on, all of these are super low risk, right? They can work, and if they don't work, then you still have the old approach of building your bots. So the value is kind of medium, but the risk is zero. The GPT-powered conversation, on the other hand, that I've just spoken about, that is super high value. It's a completely new era of human-machine communication, but at the same time, it's not without risk. There can be AI hallucination or other things going on that you probably don't want to have in your production bots. So what keeps us busy at Cognigy and what will keep you busy in the next months is moving that dot to the top left corner. We want high-value bots with as low risk as possible. And one big step in that direction was our release of the GPT prompt node. So in a nutshell, this gives every low-code developer full access to the power of large language models through a new native flow node. And in this example, I'm using it for something super simple, and that is I'm telling it, look at the recent conversation and understand the user sentiment, put it in one line. And here I'm doing the same thing, but this time I wanted to rate on a scale of 1 to 5. So if I now chat with my agent, using the example of my Wi-Fi isn't working here, it starts off neutral, the user's thankful, but nothing has happened yet, right? And now let's go in the positive direction. Hey, my Wi-Fi is working again. That user is really happy, so Cognigy rates it as 5. If we go into the opposite direction, so here in this example, someone is super unhappy, there of course works as well. It even detects it as angry and malicious. And here's my favorite example, and that is by putting in 2 phrases that are very, very similar. And the first one is, thank you for fixing my Wi-Fi. And Cognigy detects that as very happy, so degree is 5. And now I'm changing just 2 words here. Thank you for losing my package. And despite the fact that this is semantically, structurally so similar, Cognigy now detects that the user is no longer thankful, but sarcastically thankful. So the degree of happiness is 1. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have thought this is possible. Now it's real. It is available to all of us. And I think it's easy to imagine how a function like this can help you build better flows. It helps you gain better data and learn from your interactions over time. This is just one example of what you can do with the GPT prompt node. There's a million more things that you can try out. You just have to pop in your API key and it's ready to go for you. Finally, a quick look at the roadmap of generative AI in the context of Cognigy.AI. The left-hand side here shows you what is available right now, and we've seen all of these examples in my previous presentation. What is coming very soon is a step at LLM management. So we're going to see a better way, advanced way of orchestrating all these different models and optimizing for features and also for cost, right? So you get a lot of flexibility on how you deploy various LLM models within your Cognigy projects. We also see a lot of new features around better and faster bot building. We did spoiler some of these in our recent customer event. They were very well received. We're going to roll them out in the course of the next weeks and months. And then finally, speaking of better experiences, we will talk a lot about advanced agent assist functions, and you will also hear a lot about knowledge extraction. So that is definitely only just the beginning of the generative AI road, and I think we all have exciting times ahead of us. And with that, I want to hand it over to Derek. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. That was amazing, as always. Now I want to turn your attention to a whole new domain of capabilities within Cognigy, which you might sort of be familiar with, but we're introducing some really exciting new stuff. And to do that, I want to bring on one of my great friends at Cognigy who owns a lot of our voice products internally, Dilek.
Hello.
Hello, hello. How are you doing?
Pretty well. How about you?
Doing good. I have some things I wanted to show you and get your feedback on, and then Maybe we can kind of take turns with each other showing cool stuff, see how it goes. How does that
Of
sound?
course. Yes, we have some interesting new stuff.
Indeed. So the first thing that I want to celebrate is that in the past couple of months, we've introduced 2 new speech providers with Cognigy. I'll take a step back and talk about what that means. As we know, we can create voice experiences with Cognigy, and you can choose which speech provider you want to use, both for speech to text and text to speech. We've always or long supported kind of the giants in the space like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, but we've added another giant and then another smaller but really powerful player as well. So let's take a look. So the first one that I want to mention is Nuance. We've added, so probably a household name for those of us who are in the space. And then the second one you may not have heard of is called Soniax. And if you go to soniax.com, you can sign up, get an API key, start using their platform. And what might be interesting is you can read through their benchmarks. So they have models for both English, German, and Spanish. By default in Cognigy, you're going to be using the precision IVR model, but you can use session parameters to choose German or Spanish or their regular English precision model. And to demonstrate this, I thought I'd do this thing. Now, this is not going to be a true comparison of these different vendors. It's just going to be more of an example of how we can switch off between different vendors within Cognigy. So I have a series of question nodes, and I've just labeled these question nodes with a recognizer that we're going to be using. So if you click on one of these, for example, this one where I've selected Microsoft, and you go to the Voice Gateway tab, and you go under Recognizer, I've chosen the Microsoft vendor, and that's about it. All these nodes are exactly the same. They're just choosing different recognizers. The thing I chose to do is to do something that involves both regular speech recognition, but then also spelling. Because one of the challenges that you can encounter when you're taking inputs from a user by phone is that spelling things like emails or phone numbers, dates of birth, this has always been a little bit harder for speech to text engine. So we're going to push it to the limit. See what we can get from these. So I am going to make a phone call. I'm enabling live follow here so we can follow along. And we'll do the call and then we can see the results that we get. All right. So with no further ado, I'm going to make a phone call. Tell me if you can't hear me.
You are speaking to the Microsoft Recognizer. Tell me something.
The proper way to spell misspell is MISSPELL.
You are speaking to the AWS Recognizer. Tell me something.
The proper way to spell misspell is MISSPELL.
You are speaking to the Google Recognizer. Tell me something.
The proper way to spell misspell is MISSPELL.
You are speaking to the Soniax Recognizer. Tell me something.
The proper way to spell misspell is MISSPELL.
You are speaking to the Nuance Recognizer. Tell me something.
The proper way to spell misspell is MISSPELL. All right, we did it. Are you there with me
Nice.
still?
Yes, then let's have a look if they spelled it right or if they misspelled it.
All right. So again, I just want to emphasize this is not a scientific comparison of these different vendors. This is really just a for example of different outputs that we're going to get. So for Microsoft, this is a thing I've seen with Microsoft before in the state of the art is if you are spelling things and you have double letters, it sometimes treats those as single letters. So the proper way to spell misspell, it got all of the detection correctly, but it didn't get that I was spelling something. But sometimes that's what you'll see. So if we switch over to AWS, it got the whole phrase correctly. It figured out that I was spelling letters. Go to AWS. If we look at Google, for some reason when I said it, it got it as though I was speaking in the past tense around misspell. I might have just said it slightly differently. And it gave me the spelling here, but it didn't separate the letters. That may or may not matter depending on the use case you're solving for. Now with Soniax, it got that I was spelling individual letters. This is because we're using the precision IVR model, which is actually optimized for these spelling kind of scenarios. So I really separated it out. So if in my flow, I wanted to do some stuff with the spelling, I have it one letter at a time. And finally, with Nuance, Nuance had the biggest challenge. It got the proper way to spell and misspell correctly, but it did not get the spelling so well. Now, this is all just the out-of-the-box way of working with these different providers. You can, of course, create custom models that are optimized for the speech scenario you want to solve for. The bigger picture here, I think, is just celebrating the fact that with Cognigy, you can mix and match these different providers within a single phone call, so you can use the one that's best suited for your purpose. All right, so that's thing number one. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's awesome because at the end, it gives you so many different opportunities to make sure that you can use the best provider for the best fitting use case. So definitely improves every voice bot, I would say.
I agree. Now, the next feature I want to show you is STT Hints. Now, we've had this in the product in different ways before, and I think the innovation that we've had is we've introduced the ability to have STT Hints in a lot of different node types now. I think it's always been there in the set session parameters node, but now we're kind of expanding that to a wide range of nodes.
Makes sense.
Now, what is an STT hint? Here's the deal, is that with the recognizers, they're going to do their best to recognize what you say, like I did in this example I showed. But sometimes it's going to need some help figuring out what the user is saying. And to do that, this is a question node that has hints enabled. If I go to the voice gateway channel and I go to my recognizer, I've added some hints of some amazing Cognigy employees. You'll see how I use this in a second. But we also support dynamic hints. And I think this is new, which is the ability to say, I can do a query to my CRM. I could retrieve a user's name, a caller's name, maybe based on their phone number or something. And then I can put this in here as a speech to text hint dynamically. So I'll be able to recognize their name. So very powerful.
Maybe something to that, because we actually had that before, but it was quite difficult. You used to use a code node for that. And now this is something that we have really integrated deep into Cognigy and made sure that it's also visible in the UI to also give a better user experience to everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And you'll see a lot of that with Cognigy, where stuff is there that is doable, but we kind of always drive to make it even easier and kind of a little bit more out of the box. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a call, and it's going to first hit the node without the hints, and then it's going to hit the one with hints. Now, this is going to reveal a little bit about who my favorite employee at Cognigy is. So let's listen.
Who is your favorite Cognigy employee?
Dilek Msetoglu.
Who is your favorite Cognigy employee?
Dilek Msetoglu.
Same.
Okay, I didn't have live follow turned on. So I'll show you what happened after I did turn on live follow. So you can see that with the hints enabled, we captured Dilek's Dilek's name exactly correctly with the right spelling without me having to spell it out for the bot. If I did not have the hints enabled, if I had live follow, you would say that it would do its best to capture something, but it's just not good with Turkish names, which I myself have mispronounced.
It was good though.
Yeah, it's a very neat feature. And if you think about if you are, for example, looking up someone's reservation and you want to verify the name on the reservation, maybe you get the reservation ID first, you look up the record, you want to verify the name. This allows you to capture complex names that may not be names that are native to the language of the recognizer model that you're using. So very cool. All right, just a couple more things that I want to show before I turn the mic over to you, Dilek. One is going to be, just real quick, I'll show you a new node type that we have introduced, and that is the ability to send metadata. So if you go under voice and send metadata, this will allow you to send just an arbitrary set of key value pairs over SIP to the channel. where you might use this for is I was talking about the idea of looking up a reservation or maybe looking up a CRM record. If I want to pass this data into, for example, a live agent experience where I want to give the agent a screen pop when the call comes on, and I pass him that CRM record number or that reservation ID, this allows me to pass not just the voice stream over to the agent, but also some metadata. So that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to talk about here is call recording. And I want to do that. So let me share one other part of my screen. Give me a second. Let's share this one. Okay, call recording. Everyone has a little bit different requirements for call recording, and everyone has different applications that may pre-exist that support call recording. So our objective in supporting call recording features has not been to kind of make you tear out to your recording server and do something with Cognigy, but we want to make it to where we can be a front end to any recording server that you're using. So in this diagram, you see on the left-hand side, a caller calls, it naturally goes through their carrier and gets transferred to the voice gateway. Now, our voice gateway does all the stuff it normally does, like I've been showing you in these examples, but it can also act as a session recording client. So what we do is we send a SIPREC command to your session recording server, and then we stream the media to that server so it can do call recording in real time. So that itself is a good feature to have. But what I think is really interesting about it is we're able to start, pause, resume, and stop recording just within your flows. So imagine a scenario for that might be, I want to record the call, maybe the whole front end of the call, but maybe we get to a point in the call where the user is sharing some sensitive information. And maybe we want to stop call recording for that moment in the conversation, and then we resume it once that part of the conversation is over. So you have full control in your flows around how our recording client communicates to your session recording server.
I think this is really great, especially because we can pause it. Since I'm located in Germany, we have to take care a lot about the GDPR stuff. So before actually before continuing the recording, you can ask your customers like, is it okay if we record the call? And depending on that, you can either resume it or you end the recording because they did not agree on it. So I think that will be really, really important, especially for everyone who is based in Europe.
Absolutely, it's a great feature to have. So that's my bag of tricks for today. Just want to show off a few things. What have you been working on that you want to share?
Hey, so I think the first thing that I would like to share is something that you just mentioned earlier, that we sometimes do have some features which are not always really visible in the front end yet. So let me share my screen and show you a few great things that we've been working on. Okay, right. So we have our set session config. And we have extended this a little bit and added an advanced section. And now in here, you have a JSON field where you could add new parameters in. What you can do is, in case you already used some kind of voice gateway, used some kind of voice web before and just want to add your configurations from beforehand in here without going through all of this, you can add it into your JSON field. But what we sometimes do is, to make sure that our customers get some features earlier or that we can actually test with them together, we do add a few things into the product that are not directly visible in the UI, but can be configured either, like I mentioned before, through a code node or something like that. Now we have this JSON field where one of the examples that I will show is basically the language recognition. And this is not just a simple language recognition, but we have our default language, and then you can add 3 additional languages, and whichever language the customer talks will be recognized. And then we can basically make sure that the rest of the conversation with the bot will be in that language. Then to have a quick look in here is, of course, we're changing the recognizer settings since we want to recognize the language. In language, we have our default language, which is currently English. We have a default vendor. And then we have alternative languages. Here, we sadly have a limitation to 3 different languages, and I have just chosen German, Korean, and Japanese. So basically what the flow does is we welcome the customer, we set our alternative languages, tell the customer, hey, you can communicate in different languages. And once the customer then says something, we actually have a look or try to recognize which language they're using. Then we look this up. This is just some data payload that we received back. So we look for the language code. And then depending on which language has been recognized, we basically make sure that we, in the set session config again, that we set all the options to make sure that the rest of the session will be in that specific language.
I noticed that you're using Microsoft as your speech provider. Is the language detection tied to the capabilities of the speech provider?
It's not valid for all the speech providers, but for the basic ones like Microsoft or Google, they usually work also with 3 languages that you can add in there. Okay, then I would say, let's start the live follow and give it a try. Hi, konnichiwa, watashi wa Dilek desu.
So I have some good news and bad news for you, Dilek.
Yes.
So good news is
that the audio is not working, right?
it's okay. I could see in the live follow there impressively that it's able to detect your language. Also, how many languages do you speak?
A few. A few.
That alone is impressive, but the fact that we can detect the language and have it respond to you in the proper language, I think, is incredibly powerful.
Exactly. I mean, the good thing here is basically that once we start the conversation, let's scroll down a little bit. What we can see in here is, since we have added 3 different languages, what it does is it goes through all of the, it recognizes what has been said. It goes through all of the different options. And then literally goes word for word. And this makes it easier also for customers if you want to change locales or something like that. This makes it easier for customers to know that they can directly speak in that language instead of saying, like, for German, press 1, since that's like the usual voice bot. And we kind of want to make sure that with Cognigy, you can have more of a human-like experience. And I think with this, we go more into that direction. So I think this is quite a great feature, which is coming to the UI soon as well. But since we don't have it in the UI yet, I think this was perfect to show what you can do with all the advanced session parameters.
And I maybe could mention one more thing about that session parameters field is I was mentioning earlier on that the Soniax provider, we're using the precision IVR model by default. But what's coming is in that session parameters field, you can specify different models that you want. So if you want that Spanish or German or kind of different models, and that can work with other providers as well. If you want to provide an arbitrary set of key value pairs, they're going to map to the capabilities of that provider. So we'll have that documented soon, I think.
There's just so much you can do with this. This is quite nice, I would say. And I think everyone just needs to have a look at our documentation in general, since if we add something, we usually add it to the documentation with like a tiny note that it's currently not in the UI, but this basically gives you the opportunity to already test out things that are working, but just not in the UI yet.
Great. What else do you have in your cookbook for today?
Yes, there is actually one thing where I really need to switch and make sure that you can hear my sound. Yeah, I mean, in general, a topic that we have been working on here in Cognigy, a really big topic that I will just quickly mention, is Agent Assist. And of course, we also have use cases that are not just chat, but also voice use cases. And with this, we have actually extended our voice gateway to make sure that we can also use this for Agent Assist use cases. And of course, there are so many other use cases that I will mention in a second. But what we have added is a new type of transfer, basically. Before, what we had was the refer. this is basically having a SIP refer. With this, you transfer the call to another target. And what happens here is that you connect two targets with each other, but the bot will actually not be in the session anymore. And if the bot is not in the session anymore, that means we as Cognigy, we can not do anything in there. That's why we have added the dial. And with dial, we basically do a SIP invite. And what happens with the SIP invite is that the bot is already talking to a customer. And then if we have another target, what he does is the bot basically invites that other target into the conversation to have kind of like a group conversation. And the role of the bot in here is actually pretty simple. The bot stays in the session, listens, and also transcribes. And the benefit here is basically first we get the transcription because we're still in the session, and we actually get a full transcription. And how we get this is actually also pretty easy. In our node, we basically, of course, have to define that we want to use dial. Then in case you want to add a reason, you can always add a reason to be in the box, which is usually pretty good. Then the target is the new person, new bot, live agent who you want to transfer to. The caller ID only needs to be specified in case we're using, as an example, Twilio as a subtrunk, because we always need a registered number to do outbound calls. In case you want to make it fancy, you could add some dial music.
Always.
Right. And then we get to the cool stuff, which is the transcribe function. What we can do in here is you can choose all of our vendors that we support. If you do not add anything in here, we just use the default settings that are already set up for your voice bot. So you would not need to set up anything in here. But like we mentioned before, for some use cases, it makes sense to change your vendor. For some use cases, it's fine to stick to any of them. So this always depends on the use case. And of course, with the vendor, you can change your language. The transcription webhook is basically the part or the bot or wherever you want to receive your transcription to. As an example for Agent Assist, we basically send this to another endpoint to make sure that we can then go to our Agent Assist flow. But in a second, I will show you what we can actually see in that transcription. And this is also quite a cool feature because I have mentioned that we can get the full transcript. So we do not only have the called party, the caller party, but we can choose that we want to have the full audio stream of every single party involved in that call. And with this feature, we basically make sure that we have the entire transcript of the call.
So just to recap, because we were talking about this earlier, what was helpful for me in thinking about it is, so I call a phone number, I'm a customer, and I interact with a Cognigy bot through Voice Gateway. We get to a point in that conversation where I need to talk to a person to help me further. And what this is going to do is it's both going to connect me with that live agent, but then simultaneously be able to provide transcription services or whatever I do with that webhook output, for example, for Agent Assist, to be able to have that kind of three-way call going on.
Exactly. I think that makes it easier to understand because I think it's also important to understand that the bot is still in there, but the bot actually really just listens and transcribes. Like it's not that the bot can actually say something in between that conversation, but it's really just there and transcribes to make sure that everything is being written down somewhere and can be either used again or can be stored in insights to make sure that we have the transcript in there. And yes, then I would say, let me quickly.
Hello to the voice bot. You will now be transferred to another target.
There we go. My phone is ringing. And now I have to check what I need to mute because I have 3 microphones on. And And what we can see is what I have added in here is webhook.site. This is just a simple site where I can see the JSON of the transcription that we get. And here you can already see what I am talking about. Yeah, this is basically what we will get. I think what's also pretty interesting is that we have channel tags in here. So that means if I talk like this, I am currently talking as, let me see, as the caller. So that's why we have the channel tag too. If I would mute my other microphone, and now you might hear me again. And this is when I basically have the channel tag 1 to make sure that we can actually differentiate between the two audio streams. So this gives us so many different opportunities. And even with simple use cases, like you do not even need to use Agent Assist for this, but just in general, if you transfer a call, usually you don't know what happens. If you transfer to another colleague of yours, or maybe to another bot, it might always be that you do not get the full transcript. And with this feature, you basically get everything all the time.
Very nice, very impressive. I love seeing a lot of these new features. So with that, I will thank you, Dilek. I'll let you get on with your evening. I really appreciate you joining, and I hope that I can drag you into these conversations in the future.
Of course, I would love to. Then I hope you will have a really great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, so our next conversation is going to be with another one of my favorite people at Cognigy, Benny Mayer, who is the co-founder and lead architect at Cognigy. Welcome, Benny.
Hey there, Ed. Nice to be back.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, we're going to talk about a topic today that it's kind of been a little bit hiding around, lurking in the product a little bit. I know we have big plans for it, so I'm going to ask you about that and to explain us all about it, how it works, and that is called xApps. For those of you who are totally unfamiliar with xApps, which may be all of you, I want to start off, Benny, by finding out what is the objective of this product feature.
Understood. Yeah, so we have started to create xApps. It was actually an idea that came up last year, because last year we started to really focus on extending Cognigy.AI with a lot of voice capabilities. So we, for instance, also released a new version of Cognigy Voice Gateway. And what we realized is, since we started to build a lot of voice bots, that voice bots in its nature, because of its nature, have a lot of limitations. Speech to text and text to speech, they have really evolved in the last 12 months. But there is still one major downside when I build a voice bot, which is I don't have a screen. So I can call that voice bot, I can have a very nice conversation. But maybe at some point, if let's say I call a restaurant and I want to show a menu to the end user. So we have a channel limitation that we have identified in voice. And when we started to have a look at it, and then we realized, okay, even non-voice channels, like let's say WhatsApp, a digital chat channel, they have natural limitations. They can render, let's say, images, they can show video, but maybe you want to show very specific content. Maybe you want to show a payment form so that you can actually do a purchase something through that channel via the bot. Or maybe you want to show a seat picker because you're calling, having a chat with your local cinema and you want to get tickets for tonight's show. And then you want to define where you sit in the cinema theater. And we realized, okay, there is some limitations that these different channels have. Can we overcome these limitations? And this is
I want to give you a couple of other examples before you get into kind of how we solve for it. One thing when I'm talking to a live agent, so I've made a phone call in and I'm talking to a live agent, that always gives me anxiety is when they ask me for my email address, because I don't know if they're going to capture gamergod88@gmail.com all that successfully. So I try to spell it out I hope that the person gets it right, and then I just wait for a confirmation email to see if it's accurate. What would really be helpful in that circumstance is if I could visually confirm that what I've said is actually what's been captured.
Yes.
The other scenario that actually comes from a customer, which was they did not want their live agents, the live agent scenario, to be entering credit card data themselves. So they didn't want the agent to be exposed from the to the credit card data, just to kind of do some containment around PCI and how that worked in their contact center. So there's just kind of two concrete examples of where having a visual data entry option outside of just voice would be great. So how do we solve this problem?
Yeah, so we had all of these different ideas as we identified these limitations, and then last year we have actually created a concept. Back then it was not called xApps, it was actually called one-shot widget, because the idea was, as part of my conversation, as part of my flow logic in Cognigy.AI, at some point I want to capture information from the end user, from the customer, via a screen that we display as a web app on the phone of that customer. And we only want to capture one information, get it as an input, maybe present a page with 3 options, and then we tell the customer, okay, pick one of the options on your screen. And then, of course, we thought, okay, how can we actually unify this experience? How can we take the session that the end user, let's say via WhatsApp, already has with our system, and how can we guide the user into the mobile web browser to actually see this page? And the solution here is by sending a link. And step by step, we actually crafted this concept, which we now call xApp. So the idea essentially is, I have my flow logic in Cognigy.AI. I design the conversation, and at some point in the conversation, I decide now it's time to shift away from the current session, from the channel limitations in a voice call or in my WhatsApp session. And now we shift the conversation to the web browser. We display a web form, for instance, to gather an email address. The user is now typing in that email address and hitting the submit button. And as soon as we do that, the conversation goes back and, let's say, into the WhatsApp channel, which makes the whole user experience more streamlined and quicker, obviously.
I think a provocative thing about this, I remember back when we were talking about it, is we are a conversational AI or conversational automation platform, and yet the use case you've described is non-conversational.
Yes.
And I think it's important, I think we're all keeping this in mind. It's like what we're really doing with conversational AI is having a conversational front end to a user experience, solving a problem for the user. And this is kind of a way of saying, hey, sometimes conversational interactions are the right way to do this, and sometimes they're even faster or more efficient or more convenient ways to do this. So I love the idea that we're taking this approach.
Yeah, that's more like what we have now packaged as xApp. We have already done a private beta in the last couple of months. So with a small group of selected customers, we sat together, we had a couple of hacking sessions, we implemented different xApps, things like authenticate with your Microsoft credentials, pay with PayPal, and other cool things that you can package as an xApp. The important part is xApps are always built with web technology. They run in a mobile web browser. Most mobile browsers on our smartphones are very modern. So they support a lot of capabilities. And since new web technologies are now finally here with these mobile browsers, the mobile browsers can also, and that's a very interesting aspect, access the device's capabilities. Things like Face ID, for instance, or Touch ID, or accessing maybe parts of your wallet that you have on your device. This is now also possible via standardized web APIs.
So one of the things I have wanted to know was, I guess, 2 things. One I'll ask you to just talk about, and one if you can kind of walk us through in more detail. And maybe starting with the second thing first, how do we tie the voice session and the mobile session together? How do these things talk to each other?
And I think for that, I'll quickly share my screen.
All right, let me just have this here.
So what we see here is the Cognigy.AI flow editor. We have prepared a little sample project And of course, the flow would be very complex. Maybe in this flow, I've already asked a series of questions. The key point here is, or that I want to highlight here is, we have at least 2 new flow nodes that are xApp related. We have one flow node that is called init session. And this is what I actually need to do as a conversational designer. So as soon as I want to use xApps, I need to somewhere in my flow place the init session flow node. So once I hit that flow node, this second session next to my actual Cognigy.AI session that I might have for my voice bot, let's say, the second session is being created. We call that an xApp session, and that session is just in the background. If you do not call this node, this session will not exist. So it is mandatory that you call it at some point in your flow logic. The reason why we built it this way is in order to avoid that we just create xApp sessions even though we're not using xApps. So it is an explicit decision to use xApps at some point in your conversation. In theory, you can call it as many times as you want in the flow nodes. You can place it somewhere in a central place, because only the very first time it will actually create an xApp session. The next time when it's called, it won't do anything. Once that session is established, it is your duty as a conversation designer to eventually send a URL that we will create for you, a unique URL which is bound to your session, let's say the session of the caller, and you need to send that URL to the caller. If it's a voice bot, what we usually do is we use our Twilio integration, for instance, and we send that link via an SMS. If it's not a voice bot, let's say this is a conversation that I plan to have via WhatsApp, then I send it via, let's say, a graphical output and actually display a clickable link inside of my WhatsApp conversation. The third step is I have initiated the session. I send a link for that session to the end user. And now I also need to define what does the user actually see in that session. By default, if I just send the link to the user clicks on the link, a default page is being displayed. That default page will be Cognigy.AI branded. It's a blue page showing our Cognigy.AI icon. And you have a text snippet, something like, this is Cognigy xApp. There's nothing you can interact with at the moment. But as soon as I place one of these additional xApp nodes in there, for instance, show HTML, I can actually influence what will be displayed when the user visits the xApp session in the mobile browser. We have, of course, debugging capabilities built into Cognigy.AI. So I can now actually start a chat with this flow. I say hi, and then in this case, since we are not on a voice channel, I hit this quick reply with, or this list with a button. I can click on that button, and as you can see now, some HTML is being displayed. So in this case, an xApp that lets me gather the first name and the last name of the customer. And here, the actual conversation started within Cognigy.AI in the interaction panel. Imagine this would be now WhatsApp. And now I shifted away from this conversation, from this session. And now I'm interacting with this xApp session. So I can now put in data, click on submit, and then I will get actually back to my actual session that I have.
How does the regular or initial Cognigy session know that something has happened, like I've clicked the submit button in the xApp? How do we kind of alert it to continue the dialogue?
Yes. So how this works, essentially, we need to go a little bit deeper and actually have a look at how the architecture of xApp works. So what we essentially see is 2 things. So on the right side in this big box here, we actually see Cognigy.AI. Cognigy.AI runs on top of Kubernetes server side. And then on the left side, we actually have a mobile phone. This, of course, also works with desktop browsers, but the experience was tailored for mobile browsers that we have all with us in our pockets. So what we see here is a web page. We call this internally the xApps shell page, because this is a page that displays these default screens with Cognigy branding. And let's go through this example once again. A customer, maybe on the mobile phone, calls Cognigy.AI, starts a session with Cognigy.AI, says something to the bot. So we have this back and forth conversation between the customer and the bot. Now, at some point during flow execution, I hit the init app session flow node. What we will do is we have a new component as part of Cognigy.AI that will actually create this logical session. And with this logical session, we need to store it in some sort of a database. And then, as I said, I need to, a unique link is generated. So as a conversation designer, I now need to think about how can I send that unique link back to the user. If I'm in a phone call, the most natural thing is maybe sending an SMS, because via that phone call, I have the phone number of the caller. So I can actually send an SMS in a lot of cases to the caller. If I use a digital channel like WhatsApp, I can just display the link. As soon as I now click on the link, I load this xApps shell page. I load this website, let's say. And what the website actually does is there is a little bit of JavaScript that runs inside of this website. And this JavaScript creates a WebSocket connection to Cognigy.AI. So at this point in time, we have this bidirectional connection, which allows us to send data and display it on the screen on my mobile device, but we also have the option to somehow interact with content and send data back into Cognigy.AI. The code is obviously built for running on a mobile device, meaning even if you are on an unreliable network, let's say you are at the airport, you are connected to a free Wi-Fi hotspot or something like that, xApps will still work. The code here also tries to reconnect automatically. So if you lose the connection because you transition from airport Wi-Fi to your 5G connection, vice versa, the connection will just be re-established. And once you have this connection, we can now control what is being displayed on this web page. And how that essentially works is the actual xApp, let's say the actual web app that shows this form where I can put in my first name and last name, or the web app that lets me select a seat in a theater. It actually runs in an iframe. That iframe is displayed full screen, so I don't really realize that it's running inside of that iframe. But this outer page, it controls the content of the iframe. It controls, is that iframe loading? Is it taking too long to load that iframe? If so, after some seconds, we abort loading and we display an error message. And it also takes care of fading in the content of one iframe and loading the next content, because you can actually have the sequence of xApps. You can display one screen, let the user choose an option. The user clicks submit, and the next screen is being displayed. So we can also morph or apply smooth animations between different xApps. And it all works because we have this bidirectional connection between Cognigy.AI and the web browser in your smartphone.
So can our JavaScript, does it listen in on arbitrary events like in the web form example or in the seat selection example? How do essentially we take a user input and tell the kind of outer frame that something has happened that it needs to treat as a input to Cognigy?
Yeah. So inside of this iframe, this makes Cognigy xApps also very powerful because it uses web technology, and you essentially just need to tell us where is your iframe's code located. That could be on GitHub, for instance. That could be on your web browser, on your web server that you already have. The only thing that you have to do is you need to define the content of this iframe, and you need to embed a very small, very tiny mini SDK. The cool thing is this SDK, it does two things. It allows you to get access to data. So meaning during flow execution, if we want to display a certain xApp, let's say we want to display the theater, then we somehow need to tell the xApps page, display the following app, which is located on this domain. And here is also some data. Let's say the blocked seats in the theater. And we want to render them as non-clickable. So we need that information somehow. And that comes from Cognigy.AI. And at the same time, so the app page SDK allows you to receive data, and it also allows you to submit data. The cool thing is the app SDK just connects with this outer page. So it does not actually connect to Cognigy.AI. And this makes this SDK very small. It is less than 5 kilobytes in size, because the only thing that it does is it reads the data from the outer page and it can submit data back to the outer page, which makes it very efficient. Which is important if you run on a bad network.
All right. Well, tell me a little bit about our plans for this. You mentioned that it's been in private beta. And priorities change and life unfolds however it unfolds. But in your best thinking at the moment, how does this roll out for customers more broadly in the coming months?
Yeah, we actually have good news, which is as part of Cognigy.AI version 4.51, we will actually release Cognigy xApps as part of a public beta. So at this point in time, all of the customers will be able to actually use it. So with the product, we will of course also ship public-facing or customer-facing documentation and a couple of help center articles to help our customers getting started.
All right. Well, excellent. I'm very excited to get my hands on it, start bringing it into customer solutions, and I think we will dream up more interesting applications than we can imagine today. So I will thank you, Benny, for all the work that you have done on this product and for helping lead the organization in terms of what we're building and how we build it. I hope you have a wonderful day. And maybe just to sign off, we're now going to turn it over to our colleague and good friend, New, who's going to wrap things up. It's been wonderful talking to you, Benny, today, and for being able to share this with the audience. Thanks, everybody.
It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Sebastian, Derek, Dilek, and Benny for such an informative session. I hope everyone can walk away with useful insights that you can apply into your everyday CAI design. Before we wrap up, I'd like to make 2 quick remarks. First, if you have any further questions or simply want to continue the conversation, we encourage you to take advantage of the Cognigy.AI community. It's a great platform to share your thoughts and exchange ideas with other CAI professionals like you. Second, to stay in the loop on all new product releases, be sure to stay tuned to our product blog. So, thank you everyone for joining. We hope to see you next time. Have a great day.